we have this continued opportunity to celebrate the season for nonviolence, which goes through April. And we also have this opportunity to celebrate diversity, which is February's theme for the magazine. And finally, to celebrate love in all the ways that we customarily do in February and more. And so we have this commitment to nonviolence, we have this commitment to diversity, and we have this commitment to love. Sounds pretty wonderful, I think. Now, there's a lot that one person can do. And this morning, we're talking about two or more, the power of two or more. So one individual can, by him or herself, accomplish a thing or two. And we already know that when we add the exponent, if you will, of spirit to any individual, that person's power is infinitely multiplied by tapping into their spiritual nature. And then he or she can accomplish more, right? That's good to know. That's what we explore here all the time. What about getting more than one of us together? Once again, if we go back to just individuals without the spiritual factor being accounted for, a bunch of us could get together and accomplish something. And yet, if each one of us has already chosen to multiply ourselves by becoming aware of the spiritual factor, and then we get together, imagine what we can do. My question this morning is, do we know how to do the two or more thing? Two or more is largely unexplored because it comes with complications. It comes with things we don't yet know how to do. And so our first instinct is to say, well, that's too hard. I think I'll skip it. It comes with things we get to learn in order to be two or more and to access the power of two or more. It asks us to let go of habits of believing, of thinking, of feeling, of speaking, of behaving. It asks us to let go of expectations, of perspectives, of so much of what we have thought and felt and maybe based most of our lives on in the past, in order to discover and begin to learn about and practice the power of two or more. So we get to grow. There's that thing again. And yet it is so worth it, because what it does is it avails us of something that isn't possible for an individual unplugged from his or her spiritual awareness, or even an entire group of people, perhaps the entire population of a nation, if they're unplugged from spirit. On the other hand, when we come together in our awareness of that infinite spiritual power that is within and ready to operate in greater ways by means of each of us, of course there is no limit to what is possible through us and for us collectively. So I'm guessing that we could agree that it's worth it to explore how to do the two or more thing. And okay. And so that means that perhaps we're willing to do what it takes to get there. Yes. Okay. Amen. Okay. So here's the deal. Even though this has always been my MO from the beginning, I pledge in this moment to be present for each and every one of you and every other member of our community to support you in discovering how to do two-ness. Okay? How to access the power of two or more. Will you support me in that as well? Yes. Okay. So we have a deal. We have just made a groundbreaking deal that we're willing to explore and embody and experiment and express what it means to do community. So there are a couple of, I'm going to get rid of my jacket so I can really. Okay, that's it. That's it. There are a couple of things about that then. I don't like the term rule. So we'll say we have some agreements in our covenant, which is when I enter a room, I pledge to you that I will do my very best to remain out of judgment and criticism, and to create a space where you can safely explore who you truly are, and safely discover who that he or she, that being is. I pledge that I will not demand that you agree with me, that your values, your opinions, your beliefs, anything, your preferences be exactly like mine. I pledge that I will not hold you to my standards, but support you in discovering what yours are. Will you do that for me? Okay, see, we're on our way. We're creating community. Because if we say that we want to be free to be ourselves, and if we say, I want to speak my truth, don't we also want to be successful in making it okay for someone next to us to speak theirs? And what we access when we rise up out of our small personality ego self into the capital E ego, the capital P personality, the spiritual self, the higher self, is what is universally true. We no longer feel it necessary to say, I'm speaking my truth, which is divisive.
Yes, it is.
Okay? So what we want to do, though, is make it safe for each of us to explore, without getting bopped over the head, what that might be for us. And discover that it's not the same for any one of us. And celebrate the differences. Be curious. Be fascinated. Reserve our opinions and our judgments. Because we know from our own early life experience that if we are judged for this experimentation, we will lose our capacity to take initiative or to explore. We will choose safety instead and be less and less of who we truly are, and then have to go through quite a bit, like many of us have, to re-access that, to rediscover what that is. So once in a blue moon, I decide to say something that has to do with a Bible quote. And this one is from Amos. I have no idea where it comes from, Old or New Testament at all. Oh? Probably. Okay, so Amos 3:3 says this. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Can two walk together except they be agreed? I think the answer would have been, before we started to explore our willingness to accept differences, it would have been no. Hell no. Heck no. I can't walk with somebody who disagrees with me. And maybe even if we don't want to admit that we actually have a little bit of that in us, because we would prefer that we were above or beyond it somehow, we might recognize that we make a lot of choices about who we break bread with, who we spend time with, based upon whether we think they agree with us or not. Now, it's really easy to walk with and agree with and even love somebody who appears to be just like us. Piece of cake. They have a name for that. It's been getting a lot of airtime lately. I'm in love with my own reflection. Oh. There's more than that. We can't live on that alone. It's easy to agree with people who are just like us. However, we could, as Mary Morrissey says, turn up our curiosity and be willing to open up to discover what's different. and be fascinated about why they like bubblegum flavored ice cream or pistachio swirl or something that we just don't care for. We may be really certain that we don't like it at all. We can be mature enough, which is a choice, to say, even though I don't like that flavor of ice cream, I love all of my brothers and sisters on this planet, no matter what flavor they like. Right? That's what's called for. That's how we celebrate diversity. We cannot avoid the people that we don't agree with. Instead, we can turn up our curiosity and discover more of what makes them unique and interesting and beautiful, what brings them joy. And say, wow, isn't that fascinating? I never thought of that. We had a discussion circle in the back corner last week. And we talked about how we use these principles even in the face of marked disagreement and how they support us. It was a very good conversation, and I'm absolutely certain that some people in that circle voted for one person in the last election and others for another. We all got along, and we had a very good time. So we're talking about walking together, we're talking about agreement, and we're also talking about love. Can we walk together when we don't agree? Yes, if we agree to. If we agree to. One thing we could do is redefine what it means to walk together. I made up this saying, I don't know if it 20 years ago, I'm not sure. I think it was about at least 10 years ago. That sometimes harmony is achieved by adjusting proximity. That's a very polite way to say we needed to give each other enough space, because I was trying to remain in an employment scenario where I was in such disagreement with how things were going. I gave myself a choice. You can either stop judging and stay and be part of the solution, or you need to leave, because staying and complaining is not an option. And so I ended up giving my notice because I needed to move beyond that. My time there was done. But that let people be them and me be me. And so walking together was like, we'll just walk a little further apart. There's room for everybody, right? So we can redefine what it means to walk together. We can also redefine what it means to agree. It's not sameness. We can even agree to disagree. Once again, it's a choice. It is a choice that says somewhere in all of this, there's something we have in common. In fact, there's a lot we have in common. And if we make the choice to look for that and to focus on it, we will discover the harmony that has existed between us all along. I have a handful of people in my life. Well, maybe even less than a handful. And I can think of someone whom I've really worked hard to have a functional relationship with that I don't really click with, a member of my extended family. And what I've always discovered is if I look for what we have in common and I base our relationship on that, we can have a relatively good time. Now, I may be disappointed that that area seems so small, and yet I have no business trying to change another person. They're right where they're supposed to be, as am I. And so we walk together by giving each other a little space, and we also, so that would be nonviolence. We also exercise our celebration of our diversity by just focusing on some of the things that we have in common and being fascinated about the best and reserving judgment. And then we can love each other, right? We only get into trouble when we try to do something else. So we're saying, yes, as a matter of fact, we can walk together even when we disagree if we are willing to redefine what it means to walk together, to redefine what it means to agree, and to redefine what it means to love. Love. We know we're intelligent people. We've been around a little while. We've read a book or two or three or 9 or 100, right? We know that love is more than the superficial Valentine's Day card or something that we might say when we hang up the phone after speaking with a relative. It is infinite. It's everywhere. It's the one power. It's equated with God, Spirit. It's life itself. And so there's lots of room to practice love, where maybe we thought there wasn't. So getting back to this idea of the power of two, there's this idea that what we can do together when we're plugged into Spirit is so great that we can move mountains, that we can part the seas, that we can level the valleys, right? And there's a lot going on right now that says, boy, we need some of that. We need some movement. We need some mountains to be lowered. We need some valleys to be resolved. We need some oceans to be parted. Things are stirred up. And so there's a powerful motivation to learn how to work together. You know, we have this line up here that says we co-create a world that works for everyone. What's happening right now is this divine discontent because we have this image, we have this calling, we have this feeling in our gut about this possible world that works for everyone that hasn't shown up yet, okay? And we also have this sort of this, when we look at this co-creating business, this sense of, well, how do you do that anyway? How do you do that? Here's another piece of it. We may have learned when we were growing up that the only time we could be 100% who we felt we truly were and are is when mom's not looking, dad's not looking, nobody's home, or your friends aren't around. You know, for me it was like I had friends that were cool with me being myself, but I developed the habit of not being totally myself around other people later, as I grew a little bit older, but also at home. And so there was this pattern that developed that I could only be myself when everybody left, or I would leave, which left me alone a lot, right? And so I couldn't possibly collaborate with anyone because I thought I could only be authentic when I was alone. So this piece about two-ness, about the power of two, involves our, again, creating that safety, free from opinions and judgments, a new way of being for many of us that allows us to explore and discover who we truly are and bring him or her along all the way, all the time. And so it can be a little messy. It's like an adolescence, even in our double-digit years of many sorts, because we're learning to do something new. And so once in a while we'll muck it up and they go, whoa, that wasn't it. And that's okay. So what I have done with this spiritual psychology called the science of mind, of using metaphysics and a proverbial mirror to look at how my life is going, my desire for this world that works for everyone, and my not really being there yet, and how to work together with other people, is to do what Ernest Holmes suggests. That's to study it. How do people work together? Pick up some books on anthropology. Pick up some books from Harvard Business School about the latest styles of leadership. Pick up books on community. Find out how people are discovering how to work together. Because actually, we've been around for a while. A lot of great things have been figured out. We just might not know them yet. But what happens, of course, is the moment we need something, a piece of information, a tool, is the moment that it becomes available. And so I've been flooded with all of the information I need to take my next step. So when we say we want to co-create a world that works for everyone, our growth process, our creative discontent is in looking at the seeming chasm between where we are now and that desire for that world having been created and who we get to become along the way. Who we get to become. So here's another one. Since I'm doing this Bible thing. Although I was going to quote the George Lomsa translation. You can look it up. It's called the GLT. It's in a separate database And that's translated from the Aramaic in as much as possible in the context of history and culture at the time. Instead, I went for King James. Matthew 18:20 says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." And what does that mean, in my name? That means in the spirit of the Atman, the I am, the Buddha, the Krishna, the Christ, the light. It doesn't matter. We don't believe that it is necessary to call this by one name. It is most important to know it and to recognize that it is at the heart and the center of each one of us. So when we can willingly discover how to tap into that spiritual exponent rather than operate alone, and discover willingly how to join together and collaborate with others rather than doing it alone, and then allow that same spiritual component to be the guiding force for us as an assembly, as a group, as a community, rather than doing things in isolation, we access something whereby we're operating together in the name of life, in the name of love, in the name of all possibility. And it will be there in the midst of us. The truth is, it already is. But it can only show up to the degree that we know that. We know that. All of this talk in different forms of Christianity about the second coming of Christ. And there are people who are waiting for him to literally come back. And yet, that spirit, that Christ consciousness never left. I have read and heard that the being, the body, left because we were becoming too fascinated with the individual rather than what he was teaching. And it needed that to stop. It is within each and every one of us. And so when we gather together in the name of that, it, God, Spirit, Creator, the I am principle, the all that is there also within every one of us. Going back to this idea of being willing to change some habits, we recognize, I need a sip of water, that it means we're going to have to catch ourselves in judgment, catch ourselves with an opinion. Sometimes it flies out of our mouth before we do the catching, right? Sometimes we're the type of person who withholds until it bursts out because it's built up so much pressure. So some of us are more passive, some are more aggressive, and what we want to do is discover what it means to be assertive without judgment. Because the other two are both dysfunctional. So we're saying that we're willing to take a look in the mirror. We're saying that we're willing to grow and we might have to learn a thing or two. We're saying that we're willing to even give up a thing or two. Is that worth the price? Is that worth it? It may be a little uncomfortable, but what's happening right now, the price that we're paying right now for any unwillingness to walk with others, to find a new way to agree with others, to love everyone. The price we're paying right now is the perpetuation of violence. The price that we're paying right now is an unwillingness to embrace diversity. The price that we're paying right now is the withholding of love. And of course, we are being punished by the law of cause and effect for what we're unwilling to look at or give. It's not personal. We simply receive the outcomes associated with what we have been thinking and feeling and believing. So we have an opportunity, and we have a choice. We have a choice to say, you know what? I'm going to redefine what it means to walk together. I'm going to take a good look at that. I'm going to redefine what it means to agree and take a good look at that. I'm going to redefine what it means to love and take a good look at that. And I'm going to make it safe for people to be different from me. I'm going to make it not only safe, but interesting to explore those differences. And not only that, I'm going to look for that common ground. And I'm going to find that place where I can love everyone as my neighbor and myself. And so it is.
So it is.
So it is.